Hi, and welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I am your host, Jessica Dewell of Red Direction. You are listening to The Power of Listening. And yeah, you're going to hear that word a lot in this show, listening. Everything we know about listening is like the snowflake that is landing on top of the iceberg, and the only part of the iceberg that you see is the part that's outside of the water. There's so much more under that water that little snowflake doesn't even know about. And we're the snowflakes. And I can actually talk about that because we're going to have a snowy spring, and that's also on my mind. Coincidence there. Today, Marilyn Shannon, who is a professional listener, she has her own radio show. She does mediation. You can find her at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com in the 1-to-1 action-based business section of the website to see more about her profile, links to her website, things like that. And of course, all of the shows that she has been on with us at The Voice of Bold Business. When I planned this conversation, there was a general outline, and we actually followed the general outline very closely today. We went deeper than I expected to go, and that's one of the things that I love about Marilyn. She will play in this place of the unknown and relish the fact that there is as much between the words, maybe more between the words than the actual words used. And the more we're aware of all of that, the more we can choose our words carefully, which give us more meaning, which means the space between the words can carry that much more. And being the connected social creatures that we are, we rely on all of that information to get it right. And going back to this concept of this, here are the steps to learn how to listen, I believe in them, and it's a start, and it allows us to build a personal awareness. The thing is, at some point, it can be limiting because we do that and exclude everything else. We exclude how we feel. We exclude what we perceive the other person or people in the conversation with us feels. We miss out on the experience, and we forget to reflect back and see what is the impression that we left with. That's actually one of my superpowers, the impression piece. I'm all about that. And so whatever you say to me, I will take at face value, and then I will compare that to the impression when I leave a conversation with you. And it turns out that sometimes they're connected and I can relate to what happened. And sometimes there's such a big gap. There's more questions I have to ask. And not even have to, must ask, because I seek to understand. And as does Marilyn. So we talk about this concept of what is listening to listen, that there are parts of listening that are misunderstood, and that there are cues and clues about what's going on, and that when we're in the middle of something, we know what our intention might be, and we also know that there might be something else that is intentioned for us to take away from an interaction. It's hard to listen, and it's hard to ask questions. It's easy to just say, this is what I want, this is what I'm expecting, and we're going to get there, and I'm going to ask for feedback and repeat, and we're going to dissect this all the way through. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's very efficient. The thing is, everything is wrong with that, because sometimes some processes, efficiency actually takes away from the end goal. And you will hear in this, all of that and more in this conversation with Marilyn Shannon.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
I've got this thing called 17 tips to actually listen. So one of the points is when you're responding, first, focus on something you can agree with that the other person said. Then it says, after you've found your point of agreement, use the word and then even if it's a contradiction, and never use no, not, and but, which in general I agree with. However, if there is disagreement, I'm wondering if and is really the right thing, because it does not actually point out there is something that we're listening for and working toward together. It sounds like we're just building something that we both agree on. And so if we have time to work that in, I would like to, because I think there's a really common misunderstanding of the nuance between the two.
And it also depends on your tone. written or face-to-face. I am a stickler for the words, but I also, the tone makes a big difference, because you could say blah, 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 and if you think this is okay, what do you think of this? Propose it in a question. It doesn't have to be a statement.
I would be interested, then maybe we could also possibly explore why questions versus what and how questions, because we're going through this in my house right now. The response is, why did you do that? Or, hey, why did you do that? Either way, there's an immediate self-doubt that is caused in the other person with that why question when it's in a dialogue. Now, if it's a, why did that happen in that situation that was past so that we can change something in the future, is a very different why question.
Coming from curiosity.
Yes.
Make yourself come from curiosity instead of knowing the answer. You're better off.
We've got this basis. We've got this concept of, well, here's how you do it, right? Active listening. You pay attention, you show that you're listening, you provide feedback, you defer judgment, you respond appropriately. Cool that we have steps to learn how to listen. Yet that still only scratches the surface, doesn't it?
Well, it's still, what is the difference between that and listening?
Right.
That is doing listening, not listening and listening. There's a difference trying to think about all that stuff.
Doing listening versus...
Different than listening.
So what does listening mean?
Knowing the essence. Understanding the essence of listening. So that you will know appropriately what to say. And if it comes out and you heard it and it's not what you wanted, then you'll know how to reframe it or rephrase it or recount it or retract it or something. But to have to go through those processes, you spend so much time trying to put yourself in an outline that you're not part of the conversation. When we, not if we, but as we understand the essence of listening and what listening is about. It's much simpler than we give it credit for. I recently taught 2 classes at James Mason University in Virginia, and it was students of communication classes. And when I came, they handed out to the students a chapter on listening. One of the very first lines was, listening is difficult or complicated or whatever. And I sat back and I immediately started to laugh, because not listening is complicated and difficult. Listening is a piece of cake. You can forgive. You can be at peace. When you listen, it doesn't mean you get it all. It means you've listened to being okay, to not having it all, because you know that if you don't have it all, it's for a good reason. And so you're free. Maybe listening will tell you you're hearing something that it's for the other person, or the other person had to get something before you did. Or a seed was planted and you heard the seed being planted, but you don't have the full-blown bush. You just have a seed. But you understand that you heard the information that said, it's just supposed to be a seed now. It's not supposed to be a bush.
I want to take a step back, because we're talking about listening, and I agree with you. Most people approach listening as doing listening instead of this, what you're introducing to us as listening. And I would say I'm in that boat. One, because I lead by action. When I do something, I'm all in, and that's how I show up and be present. Maybe even I'm not even thinking about the steps of, am I doing these things? I'm still only thinking about what my intention is, and I've missed the boat and totally haven't figured out what the other person's intention is. And even if they come straight out and tell me what their intention is, I might miss it because I'm so focused on this doing listening. That is a trap I fall into. It occurred to me, I was like, oh, right, that's one of those things where until we make the mistakes in conversation, we don't know that we're making those mistakes, and we must make those mistakes so that we can get better at each interaction that we have. So starting with the first part of the doing listening and that trap that I fall into, what's your response to that?
Start a listening practice. It means that every time you can remember the word listening, you apply it to something, to what you're doing, to where you're going, to how you're feeling, what you're eating, every little nuance of what's going on. Just apply the word listening. Put it into your focus and your concentration. Every time you hear yourself have an agenda, you're talking.
Your motives, right.
Your motives. Like, oh, yeah, that's what I have. That's the feeling I have. I want them to say this, or I want to say, okay, I heard that. oh, that's what it sounds like. Listen to all the information that comes.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you could be very busy, but very quickly, some things will calm down and you'll get it so fast. It won't be this constant, oh, okay, it'll happen. Just give yourself permission. Yeah, just give yourself permission to have a listening practice because you're going to learn. So wherever you are, take in the experience, learn from it, listen the experience into an awareness, into learning. What did I get from this? What did I see from this? What was that person's experience, or how did they look when they said that, or how did they look when I said that? That's part of your listening practice. That's part of this container that you start to formulate, the sculpture, this listening thing that you start putting into a form so that a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, a year later, something's going to happen, go, oh, it triggers that memory of that, and ding, that's what it means. First, listen, not first, but as part of this practice, because there's no first, second, third, it's whatever you can hear that's popping up. Focus on how are you showing up. Let that be something you listen. So how am I showing up in this moment? Listen for how you're showing up. Am I showing up with a fullness, with an openness? Am I showing up with an agenda? Am I rushing? How am I doing when I'm rushing? You know, if I know I have to be somewhere, am I present? You're right. Listen and analyzing, in a sense.
I was actually having a conversation the other day with this gentleman. I was working with the person who helps me coordinate filling the calendar and getting these recordings set up. And it got to the point where she says to me, Jess, I think I need to hand it off because our availabilities aren't matching with this person's availabilities, and maybe you should talk to them directly. He and I started talking by email, and finally I was like, you know what? I took a step back because I'm like, well, I'm just trying to get this done. He seems like he's trying to get this done. And all of a sudden I realized we might not even be on the same page. There was something after this dialogue of 5 or 6 emails throughout 2 days. I was like, I'm missing something here. So I actually said, this may be silly. I need to step back. I'm going to step back. I'm going to share with you what I had started. And I said, my intention was, let's get a recording scheduled. And I said, and realistically, what's becoming clear now is let's get a call to talk about how this is a fit and what can we make happen for it. Total, complete positive response. It actually allowed space for both of us to give a little in what our time commitment needed to be to make this thing happen. And now we're going to have a connection. It'll be way more organic, and we'll see where it goes. I have no idea what's going to come of it. He may be able to come on the show. He may not be able to come on the show. But changing that little shift after going, well, all we're doing is bouncing these things and nothing is matching, shift.
That's exactly right. And you heard, where could it work and why is it not working? That's the thing. And then coming back and ask the right, not the right question, but a question, some question to dissect where the communication might be not connected.
I'm okay saying the right question because usually the right question is spontaneous and it starts the ball rolling to get where you want to go, right?
That's fine. Perfect.
Yeah. Can you give us an example from something that's happened to you recently where, and by the way, everybody, Marilyn is an amazing listener. So the way you saw my thing take 2 days to figure out, she does this in seconds. And this is something that we have the opportunity by using her listening practice and practice listening and experiencing more than just what goes in our ears. And I think that's what I took away, Marilyn, was the more that you took away, you know, more than just what comes in our ears. So is there an experience that you can share where your way of listening either diffused, changed, ignited, connected with somebody else?
First of all, when you notice something feels, you're hearing, listening to the fact that you feel, you're listening to know you feel something is not working. Ask questions to dissect it. So that's very important. My husband and I were at a coffee shop, and this is a while ago. This is one of the things that have triggered me to have a listening practice and to realize, look what happens when you listen, and not just to the person, but you're listening to things going around you at the same time. Distractions.
Mm-hmm.
So we went into a coffee shop and he went to the counter to order. I was behind him at a table that had all these business cards. And I started looking at the business cards, and we were not but a few feet from each other, back to back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I saw something. I said, Mark, look at this. And he didn't answer me. So I said, Mark, he did not answer me. So at another point prior to this, I would have gotten pissed off that he wasn't paying attention to me and put the blame on him.
Mm-hmm.
But what I realized in that moment was I didn't have his attention. Third, I didn't have his attention. So I turned around, I went over and I said, when you're done, I have something to show you. He said, okay. Well, that diffused an argument. That's a checklist. That says, okay, when you take that apart, you say, okay, one thing I know from having a listening practice is you need somebody's attention.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know when you have it and when you don't? When you're face to face with somebody, what are they doing? Are you asking for the time?
Mm-hmm.
Are you making sure you have enough time with them? I mean, there are certain steps that eventually, once you start that, come natural.
Mm-hmm.
Then you automatically don't even have to think about it. That's why when you said, I can do these things in seconds, yeah. I know in seconds I can hear in seconds when something is off. Not all the time, because sometimes I'm meant to work a little harder, because it's also part of my learning and my growing and my digging and for another aha. But when I do have it in seconds, it's because I've been practicing to get it to seconds. So go ahead.
I love that you just said it's not always easy for me to do this. There's time crunches, there's deadlines, there's all of these things these whatever random things I've set for myself as an expectation of stuff I'm going to do because this is what I've decided to do. The first thing to go is our just general overall awareness. And what you were talking about listening, it sounds like awareness, personal awareness, and awareness of our surroundings.
Everything around us is telling us something.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. Whether it's through our feelings that we experience it, whether it's through some smell, sight, sound, touch, everything is coming through a sense. So listening to that degree is what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so connecting all of those dots becomes easier. So when I say it's not easy, but it's not hard. It's not painful.
I like that distinction. It is not painful.
It's not painful. It's painful not to.
Yes.
It's harder, but it's not painful. Mm-hmm. It's maybe more of a challenge, but there's also a piece where you just let go, because whatever the answer is, whatever you're going to need to do is going to come. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't come right away, it will come, or you're going to learn it's not supposed to come. You're going to hear, this is not something I'm supposed to be doing now. Mm-hmm. Be patient, let it go. Mm-hmm. There's not that constant scarcity thing.
Right. And I'm thinking about group dynamics too. So let's say I'm part of a marketing team or a sales team or a product delivery team. So the sales team, let's do that. The sales team has done their job and they've sold this service. Now the product implementation team has to take this developed product or customize this product and actually deploy it and integrate it into this other company. There are so many things that can go wrong there, and there are so many things that can go right there, and what ends up happening is unrealistic expectations all the way around. And I guess from this conversation, I would almost say forced or rigid expectation with zero room for interpretation. I mean, this is what I think companies really forget, is that they're like, we got to do it this way. This is the way it's going to happen. And if there are any problems, it's all on the client because this is what we sold them. And realistically, the conversation does not end at which point in time the agreement is signed. A whole new group of people come together and there's a new set of relationships to build. And so somebody on a product deployment team understanding how to listen is the greatest asset for a post-sales strong relationship, increasing the length of time, increasing the amount of money, increasing that bottom line that client is going to bring and be happy to give to the company.
And whoever understands that can listen to figure out where is that strategy, or where is that communication link broken.
Yeah. And usually it has to do with fear, doesn't it?
It's always, if it's not broken, then
Yeah.
it's always about fear when something is out of whack.
Yeah. And judgment. I'll throw judgment in there too. I mean, one of the things that if you look at how to listen, you hear a lot is non-judgment. And one of the things that I've seen you display during our conversation here is that there is no judgment in the way that you phrase what you say, the way that you are inclusive. Your tone is very inviting and welcoming. Nothing is going to rock your world, at least on the outside.
Well, I mean, there are going to be things that are going to rock it. I mean, my grandson
Sure.
just had open heart surgery. That rocked it.
Yeah.
But no, because I'm listening. Because I'm listening and I've heard what's happened before. Which if we could listen backwards and take in some of the experiences and see in what direction they went, how they went, things like that, we will hear a lot of times what we need for right now.
Mm-hmm.
Putting all of these dots together. I am patient, and that's because I'm listening. Because listening is telling me in due time, or I'm missing a piece, or I need to do something else, or maybe I'm not ready. Maybe something else is coming. Maybe it's just not a good time.
Right.
You know, what did I learn? Anything you can get from something is better than nothing. So you think it didn't work out, but that's not true. Even if it didn't work out, there's something juicy, a jewel to it. Business, personal, whatever it is. Just listen. That's it. Simple. Simple.
Another part of judgment, and I want to stay there for a minute, is why. A lot of people confuse when to use the questions that start with the word why. Will you tell us about your experience and your opinion on that?
We give words meaning. So judgment is all part of fear. Because if you're judging, you're fearful. Remember that somebody has given words meaning, and then the rest of us have picked it up. So don't get stuck on the words and how they're defined. If you have to judge something, you can say it. You make a judgment call about a lot of things, but it's because of a choice. You can make a judgment call which drink you want to have based on I don't want that. It's too cold right now. I think I'm going for something warm. I mean, that's a judgment. How you match how you're feeling or what you're wanting to do with the tone of what you're saying. If you say, why are you feeling that way? Is one thing. But if you go, well, why do you feel that way? If you really practice coming from curiosity and wonder, because you really don't know. You can think you know, and I hear a lot of stuff. I can make up a lot of stuff based on what I think I hear. And a lot of times I'm smack on, but there are some times where I'm not because of somebody's history, of somebody's fear. I can hear even let's say somebody's ego. Well, that's all based on somebody's fear. But who am I to judge that? I'm not here to judge that. But I can,
To notice.
Yeah, exactly. So noticing, listening to know that is coming up, somebody's fear. So what do I do about it? So how do I come from a non-judgmental place, right? In helping somebody open up with, so why do you feel that way? Or, that makes me feel uncomfortable. Why do you feel that way? Say what you want to say. Just do it in as sweet a way as you possibly can. It hit me the other day. I could say, we should do that. Or I could say, shouldn't we do that? That just hit me.
It opens up a whole different dialogue.
Yeah, they both live in the same conversation. That's another thing. Does that make sense?
Well, it does to me. And the reason it does to me is because I get how words matter, and I get that I can say the same thing and rearrange the words just slightly and get totally different results. That's what I do every day in my job with my clients. Though for people who maybe don't do that, I would love to hear in your words more about it, how you would define that and explain that.
Given any situation, any conversation, whether it's in a personal or in a business-related conversation, there are walls, let's say, around that conversation. So in that same conversation, we can rephrase something, come from a different perspective, but in the same conversation using different words or different combination of words. I could say to my husband, we should do that, which could be fine. Or I could turn around and say, shouldn't we do that? Or should we do that? In the same conversation, I can come up with a different combination of words that will make that conversation better, fuller, and then more complete. And I think when we're dealing with multiple people in a multiple people setting, like you were talking about earlier in business, a lot of times we're dealing with different opinions. It's much easier to listen for being careful. It doesn't mean that you don't get your way, or that you're manipulating, or that you're being wishy-washy, or whatever people come up with. What's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal, for the most part, is to come up with a consensus, to come up with getting along, to reach something where even if everybody doesn't agree, still come up with some collaborative something. It's a lot easier to come from these kinds of places than it is to control it.
Thank you for that explanation, because you said it way better than I ever could have. I'm sticking with why for a minute, because I know in my experience, when somebody thinks they are being curious and filled with wonder, I still hear it as something is wrong and now I have some self-doubt, so I'm going to immediately move to a defensive mode. And I know I'm not alone in that. One of the things I've tried to do because of that, I'm like, oh, well, if I react to those questions that way, I know I'm not the only one. I've looked into this concept of why, and it turns out that one of the things, if somebody feels like they have to ask me why, whatever, why did you do that? Why do you feel that way? Why did it go down that way? I feel like they're taking my power away. And all of a sudden, I have no sure footing. When in fact, really, all I'm trying to do is, apparently, I needed to speak up before to keep my power. I know that is something in a blog that you wrote recently. We wait too long, and we end up giving our power away, and our right to choose is diminished. And so I'm wondering if, in your mind, if they're related or if that's a tangent. And if it's the second, that's, or something else. And whatever it is, let's just go that way.
You could say something first, or you can, as soon as you know it, you say it. Because as soon as you know it, that's ahead of the next time.
So if people are seen as like mavericks or rebellious or something like that, because they're not afraid to do what needs to be done, they just ask for forgiveness later, right? That whole concept. Those people, and I would be one of them, tend to be most defensive if they're questioned along the way. It's like, just get out of my way and let me show you my result. And that's really not a good connection strategy on either side, is it?
Right. But whoever notices it is ahead of the game and helping the game.
Oh, I might have to ask for forgiveness here. And then I could be proactive and change the game.
You might ask for forgiveness 10 times.
Right.
On the 11th time, you're going to know sooner than later when you're supposed to say something or when you can say something, so that you can not have to ask for forgiveness, that you're okay with whatever. So as soon as you get the knowledge, as soon as you hear, you've listened to knowing that you have the knowledge, that's when your listening practice is working. Maybe it doesn't work the second or third time, but it is working because you're learning. Maybe the aha comes 10th, 11th down the road, but you got it. As soon as you get it, you're ahead of the game. Life is a laboratory.
Yeah.
And I have no idea all that there is that is waiting to talk to me. I'm just kind of clearing my way. And I appreciate you talking about this, because I could talk about this stuff all day.
I know, right?
Oh, it's fun. So the more we can talk about this and share what comes, what doesn't come, how we used it, how we didn't use it, all of the things, our experiences, the more we can share these and like dissect them, analyze them, learn from each other, the stronger we're going to be. And the more we'll hear things that life wants to share with us. And I think, and I'm playing with this idea, I'm not sure yet, I think that there's something to listen beyond our intuition. Intuition is fine, but intuition is momentary. It could be just a spark of something that happens right this minute, but that spark is just a piece of the action. And that spark that we hear leads us to another spark, another piece of intuition. So that means that there's something beyond our intuition. I don't know what it is, but I know that I've heard a spark, and then I hear the next spark. So I have to feel like there's something beyond this moment's intuition.
And what that is wow, okay, now we're in my playground, which is like curiosity and discovery and exploration and willing to reflect, but not stay, especially good stuff and bad stuff. When we reflect, we get stuck and we replay those things and we become those things. And we don't want to do that. We want to use it for information to move forward. And that's where it's so funny. I pulled out a blog post of mine too, Marilyn. I was reading your Why Wait for the Last Straw. And then I was like, oh my gosh, she's saying the same thing I am in a totally different way. And how cool, because earlier in the conversation, I said, I am a doer, meaning I start from action. I don't like to check off lists, but I like to take action. I like to understand that a decision is going to be made and something is going to happen. And then we can see, are we on path or are we not? One of the things that I know for people who do what I do or do it differently than what I do, right? There's such a realm out there of how we take action and how we approach what step are we going to take and when and how, that sometimes if we're bringing it back to the concept of the why, the openness, the receiving, the willingness to let the space hold more and get more from that space, is that there are a lot of people out there that just ignore it. You know who's the worst at that? Most bosses.
A lot of them.
You know what I mean? Love them. It's really important. And by the way, every single boss out there, this show is for you. The whole Voice of Bold Business is for you, and specifically this show, because I think you do it because it doesn't matter what part. You can't handle everything that comes up. However, doing that listening exercise, it's going to become clear where the firecrackers are, where those things are that are going to take you by surprise and become bigger obstacles later if they're not addressed.
So here's the thing. When people listen, leadership looks different.
Yes.
When you listen past certain levels, you realize you're not giving anything away. You're not at stake. You listen to be able to empower. When you listen to be able to lead from the back of the bus, when you don't have to have leader across your forehead, when you listen beyond some of the, get past the fear of possibly losing, then leadership looks much bigger. It's like when you've gotten past the third day of being on a diet. And the diet gets easier, right?
Yes, exactly. Doesn't matter what it is, dieting, caffeine, sugar.
Exactly. When you get past that initial thing, the same thing with leadership. It's kind of like, oh, you get into another realm. So it makes more sense. So when leaders who are in a leadership role will allow themselves to release, connect, listen, just listen, and take their leadership deeper and deeper, they will find that they will be extraordinary and things will change.
You guys, and I'm going to say what I'm going to say next. She took the words right out of my mouth, which is, that is the benefit of fully listening, of being completely engaged, immersed, and supported by this concept of listening. And I don't want to leave out that last part, because realistically, doing those things, being those things, I don't know if you guys ever heard that, doobie. Like you do something and then you be something, and you do something and you be something. I love that concept. We become the example. So whether we have leader on our forehead, whether we're somewhere in the middle of all of that, whether we have aspirations one way or the other, I think that's fantastic, because just by what the process of encompassing and integrating all of this, we are leading by example. We are that role model that a lot of other people crave and will look to. And that is a single spark that can go to another spark, which can change the course of an organization slowly but surely. And the second one is, we're not waiting. The benefit is that we're not waiting. We're in it all the time. We're noticing and witnessing all the time.
Sometimes you are on that skinny branch alone, and you think you're alone, but you're not. You are the example. People are watching. People appreciate, really. And the other thing is, which you said, when you were talking about your blog and my blog, and how we were expressing something similar, maybe expressing it differently. when you listen, when we listen, we meet somewhere and where you're not alone. You might say it different, but the sentiment is going to be, because it has to be, it cannot be anything but the same on some level. You know what I mean? When you listen, you reach a point where you're listening in the same kind of way.
I want to end with this. I'm just going to ask you, why is it bold to listen today? Why is it bold?
Okay, because it's an adventure.
Yes.
And you don't know. So it is bold to put yourself out there to listen. It's an adventure. It's not a plan. It's not a planned thing. Sometimes I listen to plan the plan, but I don't always follow up with the same plan. Listening is bold because you trust. That's it. Listening is trust. It's the magic carpet ride. It's trust. It's going to carry you somewhere, but it's going to carry you somewhere safe and sound. People talk about listening and they're wearing their heart on their sleeve. That is not what they're wearing. They're wearing their ego. They're wearing the head. If your heart was on your sleeve, you wouldn't feel trouble. You would feel, okay, forgiveness. The heart is not loud. It's gentle. When you trust and you listen, trusting is part of listening, you're going to be fine. But it's bold because, I don't know if I'll be fine. Oh, listening tells me no matter what, I'll be fine. Okay, but I'm a human. Okay, no. You're going to have all those conversations going on at one time. Have a sense of humor. It's funny. It's a riot.
Yes.
I mean, you'll hear yourself do things or say things and you'll go, there's plenty of times, Jess, where I've sat and stood up in front of a room of people doing a presentation or on my show or selling something or coaching, and something comes out of my mouth that I did not plan for. But it doesn't matter. It wanted to come out. And it's usually either perfect or perfect. Now, I was about to say perfect and not perfect, but then I thought quick came, nothing is not perfect. So I changed my mind that fast because I heard it wrong. To me, it's always perfect for some reason. That's how it happens when you listen fast. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. You guys, we just witnessed Marilyn's process in action. So as you're listening to this and as you are watching this, when you're watching the video version, look at her face and listen to the space between her words, because you could tell she was thinking as she was talking, which is slightly compared to other parts of the conversation where things just flow out and she knows how to add to that conversation. And we all do it. I mean, you guys hear me think on this show all the time, and I stop mid-sentence and I have 3 half sentences before I complete my thought. That's me thinking. It's great to own it. And when we own it, we can say, do we like it or do we not? And that's okay. That's a whole other conversation. The thing to leave you with is that it is bold to think. It is bold to be on a path and change mid-course. And it is bold to know that whatever happens, we are where we are with who we are. And it is, as Marilyn says, perfect.
And can I add one little thing?
Yes.
So listen for when you're overthinking, because that is not listening. Overthinking is not going to be listening at all. So you want to make sure that you're in a state of coherence, where your heart and your head are somehow married, so that when you're listening, you feel this completeness. Because if you're overthinking, you can't be listening and overthinking, because you wouldn't be thinking.
Today, Marilyn Shannon, who is a professional listener, she has her own radio show. She does mediation. You can find her at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com in the 1-to-1 action-based business section of the website to see more about her profile, links to her website, things like that. And of course, all of the shows that she has been on with us at The Voice of Bold Business. When I planned this conversation, there was a general outline, and we actually followed the general outline very closely today. We went deeper than I expected to go, and that's one of the things that I love about Marilyn. She will play in this place of the unknown and relish the fact that there is as much between the words maybe more between the words than the actual words used. And the more we're aware of all of that, the more we can choose our words carefully, which give us more meaning, which means the space between the words can carry that much more. And being the connected social creatures that we are, we rely on all of that information to get it right. And going back to this concept of this, here are the steps to learn how to listen, I believe in them, and it's a start, and it allows us to build a personal awareness. The thing is, at some point, it can be limiting because we do that and exclude everything else. We exclude how we feel. We exclude what we perceive the other person or people in the conversation with us feels. We miss out on the experience, and we forget to reflect back and see what is the impression that we left with. That's actually one of my superpowers, the impressions, the impression piece. I'm all about that. And so whatever you say to me, I will take at face value, and then I will compare that to the impression when I leave a conversation with you. And it turns out that sometimes they're connected and I can relate to what happened. And sometimes there's such a big gap. There's more questions I have to ask. And not even have to, must ask, because I seek to understand. And as does Marilyn. So we talk about this concept of what is listening to listen, that there are parts of listening that are misunderstood, and that there are cues and clues about what's going on, and that when we're in the middle of something, we know what our intention might be. And we also know that there might be something else that is intentioned for us to take away from an interaction. It's hard to listen, and it's hard to ask questions. It's easy to just say, this is what I want, this is what I'm expecting, and we're going to get there, and I'm going to ask for feedback and repeat, and we're going to dissect this all the way through. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's very efficient. The thing is, everything is wrong with that, because sometimes some processes, efficiency actually takes away from the end goal. And you will hear in this, all of that and more in this conversation with Marilyn Shannon.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.